Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our fourth annual PROJILITY Virtual Project Conference today. We're excited to have you join us for this educationally focused day to help you and your teams learn more about Microsoft's project portfolio management solutions from clients who've successfully deployed them. Let's get started. My name is Annie Levant, and I'm with the Microsoft Gold Project Portfolio Management Partner called PROJILITY. We've been implementing Microsoft Project Portfolio Management solutions for over 18 years for large enterprises, including everything from engineering, construction, IT, and new product development. PMOs and CIOs typically come to us when they can't easily explain what's going on across all their projects, they don't know what resources are working on what work, and they have a hard time getting consistent reports and metrics to make project-based decisions. We're known for having a 98% on-time, on-budget track record for successfully implementing these solutions for clients. We offer services and solutions in three core areas: deployment and consulting services, PROJILITY's core business. We provide professional services for successfully planning and implementing Microsoft Project Portfolio Management, including Microsoft Project Online, integrating PPM with a line of business applications, and delivering strategic portfolio management solutions to support top-level management planning. We also have a growing Microsoft Power Platform practice where we are actively working with clients to build applications, workflows, and reports to automate their most important business processes. PROJILITY also offers a set of pre-built software solutions and accelerators based upon 18 years of experience, including a set of Hammerhead products that provide improved access to your cloud PPM data, accelerate access to visual reports and dashboards using Power BI, connect data between your PPM system with Microsoft Teams, and extend connectivity into Active Directory to improve visibility, insight, and control over your work, people, and projects. We're also really excited to share that in September, we released our own unique PPM solution called PROJILITY PPM. That's an all-in-one cloud-based application based in Microsoft Azure. Finally, PROJILITY provides post-implementation support services, including expert care designed to assist your PMO with gaining on-demand expertise on the solution supported. We have a full online automated e-learning offering that can improve consistency and adoption of your users of your project management tools. For today's agenda, we're first going to go through some of the logistics for the day, including how to ask questions and availability of content after the sessions. In our first session, you'll be hearing from two of our clients, Southeastern Grocers and Walmart Advanced Systems and Robotics, who will share their experiences and successful strategies for implementing Microsoft PPM technologies. After that, we've got a great deep dive session delivered by one of PROJILITY's consultants, focused on an area we get a ton of requests for, namely, how do you understand, structure, and leverage reporting technologies like Microsoft Power BI alongside your PPM system to drive better visibility, insight, and decision-making across your portfolio? We will conclude the conference by providing a link to our survey, which also enters you for a chance to win some exciting prizes. Now for some housekeeping. After each speaking session, we'll have a questions and answer session. If you have a question, please type them in the questions and answers box at the top of your team screen. We'll ask our speakers to answer your questions after. Today's session will be recorded, so you can revisit the content and share with your colleagues. After the webinar, you'll receive a link to the recording of today's event in a follow-up email. It will also be posted on our YouTube channel. Copies of today's presentation will be made available for anyone requesting them. You can send an email to the link on the page for a copy. Finally, at the end of today's session, we have some exciting giveaways you won't want to miss. By completing the session survey, you are automatically entered into the prize raffle. To kick off the presentation section of today's conference, the PPM leads from Southeastern Grocers and Walmart Advanced Systems and Robotics will be sharing their experiences and good practices, along with deploying, supporting, and driving good use of adoption of their PPM systems. We'll begin with each leader giving a brief introduction of themselves and sharing their PPM experiences. As shared, if you have questions, please add them into the questions and answers dialog box at the top of your team screen, and we'll address them at the end of the two presentations. First up is Stephen Williamson, the Director of the IT Project Management Office at Southeastern Grocers. Stephen recently led the implementation of Microsoft PPM for his organization. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Annie. And if you could hit the next slide for me, or actually I got it. There we go. So welcome everybody. Thank you for the time this afternoon. I'm glad to speak with you about our journey through the PPM development and our journey with PROJILITY. Today I'll be talking a little bit about SE Grocers or Southeastern Grocers and what the IT PMO does here. And then we'll be talking about PROJILITY and our journey with them and then where we're headed. And you see here on my tagline, we're delivering the organization strategy. So everything that we do is really in the eye of the organization and focusing on to making those deliverables happen. So a little bit about myself. As mentioned, I am the director of the IT project management group here at Southeastern Grocers. In my career, I am a passionate project manager. I live that through and through in my day-to-day, as well as my home life and work life. I believe that making the world easier through making a plan and working the plan. If you have those things, you tend to go pretty well. As far as my experience, I've been in project leadership for 10 years. I have direct project management execution practice for 5 years, and I'm a technologist by trade. I've been a desktop technician, a network technician, as well as a server administrator. So I've worked in technology my entire career. As for project management, I personally really grabbed onto it when I was going through my Eagle Scout project when I was a teenager. At the end of each project, you have to report what you did, how you've accomplished it, and I really latched onto the practices of project management. So you can say that project manager all the way back through my teens. And if anybody's interested in connecting with me, you can certainly hit my LinkedIn at the bottom there and connect with me at any time. A little bit about Southeastern Grocers and the IT PMO. We are 38,000 associates across 500 stores in the Southeastern US. We have 1,000 corporate associates and 300 IT associates, and that's a mix of FTEs and contractors, about 70% and 30% respectively. My team consists of 7 project managers, and we work directly or primarily with the IT and the corporate space. We do some work with the store managers and the stores associates on the footprints themselves, but we do stick more towards the corporate environment. A little bit about our portfolio. We have an average of about 35 active projects at any time. We have about 8 in the queue at any given time as well, going through approval processes, funding needs, etc. And then we do an annual planning of about 50 projects. So we do incremental projects throughout the year, as well as a full portfolio planning of about 50. The total portfolio value is about $25 million that we manage, both capital and expense. Prior to Project Web Access and prior to working with PROJILITY, we had a number of issues that we had needed to overcome. When I joined Southeastern Grocers, we had inconsistent project plans. Some people were using Excel, some were using spreadsheets, some had them on a checklist. Yes, we even had sticky notes. We had an inability to locate project documentation. We had people who were using Teams, SharePoints, personal drives, and if you know also enough about Microsoft that if they're on personal drives and someone leaves the organization, we had data that was missing because their SharePoints or their personal drives were deleted. So we had a problem in retention. We had the inability to see a project timeline. So we had the spreadsheets, but unless we were really getting into deep dive Excel features or Smartsheet features, we didn't have a good Gantt view. We didn't have a good program or portfolio view. So we needed to be able to pull that together and understand where we were going as an organization. Statusing and status reports were inconsistent as well. We actually had 5 different status reports. We needed to consolidate that into one standardized format that was predictable, that everybody could read at a glance and understand what to look for and what to look to. We had no roadmaps, so we actually had 4 different programs that had duplicated information between each other. We had a number of different activities happening, and we had no clear view of what's happening, when's it happening, and how are we avoiding some of the issues that we may be having from a portfolio or project execution perspective. Additionally to that, we had minimal resource planning. So we knew who was working on projects, but it was more on feeling on whether we reached capacity. We could look at people and see the tiredness in their eyes, or we can see where they couldn't attend certain meetings because of conflicts, but we couldn't articulate to our business partners or to our individual groups what we were facing from a resource planning perspective. And then timekeeping itself, again, proving where we were spending time or understanding how people were allocated. It was very cumbersome with an archaic PPM tool we had. The tool we had not been upgraded in 10 years and actually needed a kind of a kick to really figure out where we needed to go. So as you see on this slide, what did we need? We needed something better, clearly said. So we needed to engage with PROJILITY and to really put in a PPM tool that was going to work for us. And that ended up being Project Web Access. In our journey with PROJILITY, as far as a timeline here, we signed with them in October of 2022. We ended up kicking off right before the holidays, or in the midst of the holidays, in 2022, and then going live in February. Speaking to PROJILITY themselves, they've been a great partner for us. They were willing to entertain all my crazy requests and timelines, even against some of their advisement, if I could say that a little tongue in cheek, because they were trying to make sure that we had an excellent implementation, which we did have a great implementation. But I was very eager, as you can tell on the previous slide, to get going and to build a better process for us. We did go with a bare bones implementation. One of the big things I was going for was out of the box, minimal customization, because I wanted to launch and get something that's going to help me get the portfolio in line. So we worked with or implemented Project Web Access. We did the Teams and SharePoint connectors so that we could have a central repository for documentation, but depending upon how people like to use the system, they could use either Teams or SharePoint. And then we implemented, as mentioned earlier, the Hammerhead product from PROJILITY. And I'll say those reports have been instrumental in highlighting where we are in our portfolio. And you'll see some of those even in my own presentation here. From a lessons learned perspective, I kept saying out of the box, out of the box, out of the box. Come to find out, PWA is not exactly out of the box ready to go. You do have to understand what you're asking for and what you're going to get out of the back end. You have to do some customizations. You have to build out some of those reports and those fields and those features. But to it, you can still get from a pretty light load if you want to get started pretty quickly. But do recognize that understand your timeline and what you're asking for in that timeline and what you'll get out of it. Additionally, moving people from Excel spreadsheets and smart sheets, the curve was pretty steep for our PMs, resources, and resource managers. Specifically on that, moving PMs from an Excel sheet where they could just enter in lines to a resource plan and predecessor-driven Gantt chart project plan that needed to be filled out. They had to go through a whole education on that, which again is where we needed to be, but it was quick because when we turned it on, we needed to get there fast. And then from resources and resource managers was understanding allocations, what it looked like, how did that influence other projects, where were the collisions, what was their true capacity, because you had a feeling of what your people were working on, but now let's look at what they're actually working on. And then ensure you have a PWA or a Power BI analyst. You can certainly support it yourself if you're a small enough group and nimble enough. But when you need enough information or you need more added, understanding that connection between Project Web Access and Power BI and that reporting aspect is definitely beneficial, and having somebody who can help field the questions through that education curve is something that we definitely needed. And then again, heavy on-site into organizational structure and resource planning. Knowing your organizational breakdown structure is imperative. It really drives how timesheets are done. It drives how your resource planning is done. It drives a lot of that context. So make sure you have that in place beforehand if you're getting into this product. As far as where we are now, we've gone quite a long ways. We've got project plans that are standardized. So now we have an 80-line template. As soon as we create a project, it's already there for them. We already have some of the roles specified of what's needed to happen. And then additionally, we've also, because everybody's financial focused, we already built in the financial flags for each type of task. So we've categorized them expense or capital so that people don't have to worry about that. And if they add a custom or an additional task, then they have to worry about it. But at least 80 lines of the project plan already has that definition. As a tip or trick, we did remove the predecessors. That would allowed us to be a little more nimble as we build the plan out and we get things aligned, because every plan is unique. So as we get things lined up, you may have to modify who's got those plans or where that predecessor is connected to or something of that nature. So just a little tip or trick, don't over bake your template, but provide them a good starting point. From a roadmap perspective, the first one here on the left side is what I use for portfolio management. And this is a report out of Hammerhead. We've modified it slightly to give us a little more detail than what natively came out of the package, but it's still fairly intact. But this gives me an overall view of what's in flight, what do our Gantt charts look like from an overall timing perspective. It tells me how many items are in the program, how many are active, how many are on hold. Additionally to that, you can see at the bottom, I can look at all the radials and conditions of those reports, as well as seeing how much is spent, when they're due, even planned hours versus actual hours. So I can see how we're trending towards those overall expenses, or if we're burning a little fast, if I can look at the end date and see where things are happening. And then in the lower right-hand corner for leadership reporting, similar format, but a little bit different, all the same. You have a Gantt chart, but we also have the project listing themselves, start finish dates, but it's a little bit different view in quarter format so that they can understand what's happening. We don't put the radials on there because they just don't find that as valuable. They want to make sure that things are just on track and moving forward. So again, you can build multiple reports with the same data set to get the mission and the message across. From a timekeeping perspective, one of the native reports out of Hammerhead is the timesheet compliance report that we have here that allows us to look back from week to week to see whether everybody's timesheets are and whether they're approved, submitted, in progress, or they haven't created them yet. And we have additional filters around the timesheet managers or the departmental team, because of course those can be two different people, but this allows us to slice and dice that content so that we can see which timesheets are outstanding, which ones are done, or even identify if there may be a challenge with someone in particular. And we need to highlight them or understand what's happening with their timesheets. And the bottom below is a trend that's coming out of that report. We're able to look at our goal that we set, which is a 90% compliance each week, week over week for IT. And we're able to identify each week how much we get done, right? So you see a lot of in the 80s. We did set an aggressive goal for 90% for a group of 300 people. And part of that, right, we knew we weren't going to get 100% because people are on PTO, they're sick, they do forget periodically. But we wanted to set something that, again, more information helps us plan better. So if we can get to that 90th percentile and understand where our resources are spending time, then we can plan better going forward or adjust plans if we need to. Speaking a little further into how we're using the resourcing output, and all these reports are in Power BI. From a resourcing utilization perspective, you can see here we're able to paint a picture from an entire organization perspective. We're able to talk to our business partners and say we spend about 48, 49%, more or less half the time managing operational work. And then we're able to spend about 35% on projectized work, and then we lose about 15% to administrative. And right, that's PTO, that's other leave time that happens, that's team meetings that aren't necessarily directed towards projects or operational work. And we're able to identify also in this right section here, which projects or which activities are taking the most time. You can add an additional feature that also highlights or tightens it down to be, say, look at the past 2 to 4 weeks. And that'll tell you what people are working on in that span. And then also allow you to understand, are they working on the right things? Should they be reprioritizing some items and spending more time in one place or another? Additionally, to the top there, you see the OBS box. Going back to the organizational breakdown, we're able to carve off to look at individual teams. And we can have an individual conversation with each of them to understand their capacity, to make sure that they are understanding what they're reporting as well, so that we can have a conversation about future planning. So each team's a little bit different. If you have a help desk, they're going to be heavily operational. And so you need to be able to understand that. All the same, if you have developers, they're going to be heavily projectized. So you can look at the individual roles and teams and depict on how much percentage of time they're using in that space. And that lets you have the conversation again with business, because they're always looking for new work, new projects. But you can say, we can only give you 35% of our annual capacity, and look at those components and have that conversation with them over what we can and cannot get done. Diving a little deeper from an internal management perspective, from a team level capacity plan. Again, this is another Hammerhead report that we've expanded on. So from that, we're able to break out the individual teams that we have and look at their individual capacities. And you can see the reds, the whites, and the greens. And the reds and the greens, of course, highlight where they don't have capacity and where they do have capacity. So we can look at this on a month-to-month basis. And I'll say, right, resource planning, given that education curve that I talked about, we're still on the journey of getting this quote right, or right sizing this to our organization and learning what that is for each team on each level. As mentioned, you can see kind of the pluses and minuses in the lower blue box there. If you hit the plus sign on each of these teams, we can actually carve out and see the roles for each of them. So while it may be misleading, let's using merchandising systems as an example, it may be misleading that they're underwater by 225 hours. You can expand that and say, okay, I have a couple roles that are underwater, but I have other roles that have capacity. So I can still get some other things done if I need to get done. Or two, also the people that are underwater, we need to expand on that and figure out who's drowning, and we need to save them or reallocate some work. And that allows us to do it with analytics versus those feelings that I talked about earlier. A couple tips and tricks or comments around the resource planning. Connecting tables in Power BI can be tricky. And connecting those between tasking, resources, and timesheets, they're all separate tables and separate data points, and they don't natively connect. So I just forewarn, right? If you get into it and you get into the weeds, make sure that you're validating your data to make sure you're pulling the right content you're looking for. Initially, we pulled in and we thought we were all groovy and green, and then we found out we were pulling kind of the wrong data point, pulled in the right one, and then we had some work to do. Same thread as far as the resource table and the timesheet table in particular, making sure that you have the right points in this. If you're using actual work, make sure you're using the right actual field from the right table for the right report that you're trying to get. And then the last point there, task actual time lesson. When you're using Project Web Access, make sure that you're zeroing out remaining time before you mark a task 100% complete. When you mark it 100% complete, PWA adds the remaining actual time or the remaining plan time to actual time. This kind of compounds the first two conversations, right? This is a big lesson learned for us, is making sure that you get the right process in place to close out a task, removing the remaining hours, then marking 100%, and then making sure that you're getting that update to the right tables. If you don't do it, you will inflate your reports and you'll wonder why your project closed at 20,000 hours on a 5,000 hour project because it added all the remaining work that wasn't needed. From a PWA hack, more or less an org chart hack. So we were able to use PWA in the resourcing table to export to Excel. We then loaded up Visio and used their organizational chart feature to load in all our resources. And if you have your OBS structured right, then it prints out a nice, pretty org chart for you. We do this now on a monthly basis. So as people move around and get added and removed from our resourcing pool, our org chart is automatically updated. You should have, of course, if you're working with your HR team, they have plenty of org charts for you, but they don't always capture contractors, especially in our position. So this is a way that we can look at our entire org group and see how many people we have and where they are, or who they report to. From a tools perspective, as mentioned early on, we connected our teams and SharePoint sites. We want to make sure that we had data flowing back and forth and sourcing both groups. And we put this into practice in our own team. So our own team has a SharePoint site and a Teams channel, and the content flows back and forth. The reports go back and forth. All the content is connected. And on the SharePoint site, you can, of course, organize it in different ways and link to different folders. But you can see here we got different folders for each of the groups. And then at the bottom side of our SharePoint site, we put direct links for timesheet allocations, recalling your timesheet, and all the other reports we also publish from a regular basis. We found that many people were looking for those links on a regular basis and thumbing through Power BI. And we found it was easy just to give them a kind of an Amazon one-stop shop. Come to the PMO and you can get all the information that you need in an organized fashion. And that worked out for them. As far as where we're headed, you've probably heard it enough from me over the past few slides. Resourcing, resourcing, resourcing. We're trying to understand our groups, understand where we're spending time. There are more activities coming our way than we can handle. So we need to have constant conversations about what are the priorities that we're working on, where time is being spent. So we're going to continue to work in that environment. And then to that point around Agile, we do also work with Azure DevOps and use the ADO platform for our Agile framework. And so we're looking to pull in the Agile allocations and the burn charts and some of those features to understand a little bit more about how we're using our teams holistically. And then going to that, we're going to be using Azure DevOps and tying it into a PWA roadmap feature. So there's an additional feature from Project and PWA where you can combine both roadmaps of Project and Azure DevOps. And so we're going to be looking to tie those together. So again, we get the holistic program portfolio view. We can see everything that we're working on, see those prioritizations, and again, communicate that to our business partners. Because if you show them one report, but you only show them half the picture, then you're not telling them the whole story, or they're not getting the understanding and value out of what you're providing to them. So we're tying those things together to show them everything we're working on so that we can also, again, show them the progress that we're making. And then the last item there is around portfolio optimization. As mentioned, we do annual planning. We also have 5-year roadmap development plans, and we're going to be using the portfolio optimization features going forward to start learning how to build our selections. So as we go into annual planning, which projects have the highest ROI, which ones have the highest expense or the highest resource or cost, or understanding the balance between those, which ones align to strategy better. So we're going to be using that portfolio optimization feature in the next cycle, which will be exciting to see and for us to develop. And to kind of wrap it up, Kaizen, right? Constantly improving, constantly changing. The world is changing around us. We have to change with them. So we've embraced this from the Southeastern Grocers, IT, and the PMO sectors. That we're going to constantly be changing and working and improving. So this is not where our journey stops. This is where our journey starts. And with that, Annie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Stephen. Super presentation. Next up is Dave Schiff, Senior Manager of Technology Operations at Walmart's Advanced Systems and Robotics Group, formerly known as Alert Innovation. Dave has a deep background in both IT and PPM systems and will be sharing his team's successful journey in implementing Microsoft PPM. Dave, the floor is yours. Feel free to take charge and switch gears here. Of course.
My name is Dave Schiff. I am from Walmart Advanced Systems and Robotics, formerly Alert Innovation. So you can go to the next slide. So Alert was a startup, started in 2016, and we were acquired by Walmart last November in 2022. And as of this month or October, we're now the Advanced Systems and Robotics Group within Walmart. We're based out of Andover, Massachusetts. What we develop is the AlphaBot automation product, and it's an automation system to consolidate and dispense orders at Walmart micro fulfillment centers. To the left, I show key components of the AlphaBot system. There's a large structure that contains totes with customer orders and inventory for groceries in 3 different environments. We have ambient environment, chilled, and frozen. We have robots that is the only moving part within the system that goes and retrieves the totes and brings them to picking and IO workstations. And these are the key hardware development pieces that need to be developed as part of the system, and we have a lot of software. So what the solution that we were bringing into house and working with PROJILITY was to improve our project portfolio management tools and processes to develop these systems geared towards the product development and operations program managers as being our customers. So we can go to the next slide. So about me, I'll go about me now. So my background is in engineering and program management. I've straddled the fence for a number of years. And I come from the system, hardware, and software development background, mainly in hardware development. I've worked in the defense, internet security, telecommunications, and now in the robotics and automation industry. I've worked going back into my early days in electro-optics. I spent a fair amount of time developing mission computers in the defense sector. Voice over IP gateways, signal processing systems. I spent a fair amount of time in developing hardware platforms for internet security appliances. And now I'm in the robotics and automation space. I've been at Alert since April of 2021. So just over 2.5 years now. I've had a number of roles here, but and I was initially the program manager for the bot that I spoke of, and I am currently the senior manager for the engineering operations team. And as part of that team, I'm leading a team that's bringing in expanding the project portfolio management toolset and processes, along with we're bringing in business intelligence solutions. And yep, I enjoy travel and photography. That's what I try to spend some time outside of work on. Okay, any next? So the motivation for us working with PROJILITY and looking at a different solution is that, we have a diverse set of subsystems that need to be developed. A lot of these are in inventions. We have a broad set of engineering disciplines and program management disciplines. We have large number of electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, software engineers. We need to do site construction. We have operations and quality and DevOps and program managers. We have a broad base of disciplines. And as part of our journey, since we were a startup and that we've been acquired by Walmart, we're growing fast. We're growing fast as far as the team, and we're growing fast and as far as deploying our product to sites. So it's a very dynamic environment, and there's a lot of projects in play. There's a lot of demand for continuous improvement and new projects. We need to be able to integrate a system that we can get a handle on that from a program management perspective, and drive our ability to be able to track projects, but schedule, cost, and resources. A lot of the same things as Steve presented in his presentation. It's just coming from a different place. Okay, next slide. So once we determined that, we need to improve our tool sets, we need to improve our processes, some of the key objectives in determining where to go is that, okay, we are a Microsoft house, so we want to drive our solution to be aligned with Microsoft platform. So that drove us to be aligned with the decision to go with Microsoft Project, and Microsoft Project, the PWA, the Project Web Application. And that brought with it, it would be tightly integrated with Power BI. And Walmart, we are, driving to be a data-driven, make data-driven decisions. And so the integration of PWA with Power BI supports that objective. And, with Power BI, we can get access to more data sets than just PWA. We're integrating other, SharePoint and other data sets to provide a complete picture of our projects. Using Microsoft Project in Power BI provides a better process for bringing consistent processing and reporting to bear, right? So we would do program reviews, and we had a template for a PowerPoint, but they would all start to diverge, come in differently. And so using a Power BI report simplifies the getting data from PWA, but it also provides a consistent platform for presenting to management. Another objective was to reduce costs. Our existing solutions really weren't aligned with the needs of the business, but also they were more expensive. So, since we were a Microsoft house to begin with, integrating Microsoft Project, it did reduce the cost of the overall solution. We needed a scalable platform. So, our initial implementation is really bringing in the framework. It's bringing in project portfolio management framework so that we can continue to evolve. I mean, we're utilizing it now, but we're in the very early stages of adoption and growth. There's a long way we can go. Just like Steve was saying before, getting a handle on the resources is a challenge and an opportunity, because once we get that and we get our projects in there, we'll also be able to utilize the project optimization piece that is available in project. We're not using that now, but it is a goal that we're trying to get to because it is a need. Okay, next slide, Annie. This is just a brief overview of the solution, right? So this just shows the components in PWA, Power BI, and some of the key functions that it can integrate with. So within PWA, there's Project Center and Resource Center, right? You can have a project site we're tracking actions and risk and issues and decisions, and it's the document library. So, we do have document sprawl where we can have documents located in lots of different locations because we have a lot of tools. PWA does provide a capability of consolidating that information, so you have a consistent look and feel and a consistent way for the project managers and program managers to control their projects. We are using the project scheduling tool, obviously, and project plan tracking, capacity estimation. Things that we have not leveraged within the PWA environment is the project portfolio cost and resource analysis piece, nor the project intake piece. So those are things that we would be evaluating. Right now, we have project intake outside of PWA, but it's an opportunity going forward that we would look at. There's also roadmap capability within PWA, but we're not utilizing that. That's what the gray means. In this upper right, this just shows that, in our Power BI reports, we will pull data from some of our software project apps because we use other tools to track software programs. We've been targeted initially to the hardware, on the hardware side of the house, controlling those projects, and now we're starting to bring those tracking software projects within PWA, but we need to also integrate that into our agile process and agile tools. And we are evolving the Power Business Intelligence side of this to integrate with our Power Apps and Power BI apps. And then we'll evolve scoreboards and metrics and other dashboards as we evolve. On the left-hand side, a key part of this is not to implement just the implementation of the technology, but it is supporting your users. And it is harder than even I thought it would be, but there's ongoing training and ongoing support that's required. The solutions need to be as simple as possible, because the project managers aren't always going into Microsoft projects. So, you're going to get a lot of questions. There needs to be a support infrastructure around that to support the users. And we're in different levels of goodness on this solution, but we just need to be able to continue to evolve. Okay, next, Andy. This is the journey, right? So this is a typical development cycle. And it really should have a circle coming back from continuous improvement to concept. But, the journey is we develop a concept, you develop a vision, decide, bite off what you can do as far as your initial implementation, get buy-in from your key stakeholders and in management. Then there's the plan, evaluate, select your technology suppliers, establish what your minimum features are to go live, work with your supplier to establish a good, statement of work, establish your team, both with the supplier and internally, because it wasn't just me, right? So there was a team of people a shout out to my boss, Heather, and Pam, who was supported me in bringing Microsoft Project in, and we're continuing to evolve the solution. But you establish your team. In parallel, you can develop your internal proofs of concept, continue to sell within the organization, get budget, and then engage with your supplier to actually perform development and test. It's important to leverage your partner with their training and their ability to be able to keep you in the guardrails as far as what you're actually implementing. In our implementation, PROJILITY was key in that. Then you launch, maybe development and test with key stakeholders, then launch the product. And then you got to continue to learn and bake in the feedback back into the solution. So the adoption can be large, right? So right now we're in the adoption phase where we've been using the solution since May of this year. So we're 6 months in, but I consider us still in the adoption phase, and we're ramping up adoption. And adoption means that we continue to onboard more and more program managers and more projects. So it's the overall operationalization piece. We continue to build out BI dashboards and BI reports, and you got to continue to get feedback from different eyes, different people. Everyone has their viewpoints, so you have to have a group that can distill that information and continue to improve the product and continue to improve the users. So next slide, Annie. So the benefits of the platform, just to wrap it up, I mean, it does drive process. It will integrate best practice and reporting consistency. By tying the disparate pieces of data into a BI report, you can tell a story, and it can tell a consistent story. So it supports the program in doing that, and you can drill down as required. Excuse me. And it should drive our schedule predictability. And we're all different levels of goodness here also, because it takes time. But as you get your schedules into Microsoft Project, you develop templates for your schedules. It could be different project types. It will drive a level of rigor that, coupled not just with the tool, but with the processes around that should drive schedule predictability. And it should drive cost schedule predictability. It should drive allocation of resources. And then in the last bullet here is about project selection and resource optimization. That's a journey, but we're driving towards that. And having the framework in place should be able to support this. And I think that's where we're really driving to. Next, Danny. So key lessons learned, as much as you can, leverage kickstart solutions and expertise. If you do not have the expertise within house or the capacity to leverage that expertise, seek outside help, seek partners that can support you. In kickstart solutions, we did use the Hammerhead. We used the Hammerhead suite of tools for Power BI, and that was very helpful to get us going quicker. I mean, you can always develop stuff internally, but wherever you can leverage lessons learned and reference previous experience, you should. Embrace continuous improvement and adoption. It's not a one and done. It's not, we did an implementation and then we're done. It's an ongoing process. And you need a core set of people that can support that. And you need to know that the solution is always going to be yearning for improvement. You're always going to be getting input, and you're always going to be having more people that are going to have to use the solution. develop and communicate and execute on the vision. I try to establish a roadmap, a aspiration of where we want to go with the project portfolio management solution, and that will just drive decision making. It will drive buy-in, and it will drive your prioritization. Don't estimate user support needs. That I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, you do need to have a support infrastructure and people for training and leverage training from your partner, and it's going to be ongoing, and it's probably more effort than you think. Next. So this, I'm not deep diving into the reports, but these are some of the reports that we're developing that tie in data from PWA in some of our outside data sets. But we're looking at, that top is a resource heat map. The middle chart is resources over time, and we're looking at by teams, by roles, by name. Then we have bottom left is a one pager for a project that we would typically show at a program review, and then we're integrating cost information to roll up costs from our CapEx and our expense and our labor costs. So these are just some of the reports. We have more behind it, but those are continuing to evolve also. So I think that's all I got.
Thanks, Stephen and Dave. I think we all learned something new from hearing about your journeys with PPM. We'll now open the floor to questions and answers. Remember to enter your questions in the questions and answer manager at the top of your team screen. Let's see if there's any questions in the queue. I think I did see one for Stephen. Do you have weekly meetings with resource managers to go over resources, allocations, and planning?
So we don't have weekly meetings. We have monthly meetings. We try to do weekly at first when we first started off to kind of get around the horn, get people understanding how the form works and how it goes. With how projects happen over time, we've kind of flatlined into a monthly strategy, and that helps us come back on a regular basis. And you can markedly see the difference from month to month when you have those meetings. At that point, you can see where the actual allocations are and where the actual planned hours are. When we were doing it weekly, it became a little burdensome, but it is important to have that as a recurring meeting with your resource managers and making sure that they see the reports, make sure they understand their people, make sure you're showing names and not just job titles, because that makes it attached to those individual people. When you say John Smith is burning an extra 150 hours in the plan, how are we going to help this person? Then you have that conversation of, oh, well, those estimates are inaccurate, or to the point, yes, he needs help and we need to make that move. So it's a constant conversation, but weekly was a little rough for us.
Thanks, Stephen. Any more questions for Stephen or Dave? Wait a couple more moments. All right, I guess we'll move on. Next up is a highly requested presentation on the topic of how do I get better reporting from my Microsoft PPM system? We're joined today by Todd, a PPM consultant at PROJILITY. Todd has worked to deliver project management solutions for over 15 years across different industries, including construction, manufacturing, mining, new product development, U.S. military, state and local government, and banking. He's a Microsoft certified professional. Currently, he lives in hot and humid Texas, where he was born and raised, but he might be planning an escape to the upper Midwest once his son graduates from high school. Todd, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Andy. I'm gonna attempt to share my screen. So, am I a presenter already?
Yes, you should be.
So, great. Um, all right, excellent. Looks like I'm sharing. Can you see that out there?
Yes, we're good to go.
Awesome. Okay. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. All right, so here's our agenda for the rest of the our time here together virtually. I'm going to go just kind of repeat, what you've just heard about me, and we're going to talk about some reporting challenges. I'm going to provide some Power BI tips and practices. We're going to go into data access, some data architecture and modeling, and then we're going to look for ways to drive efficiencies with our report development and maintaining our data sets. Finally, we'll also kind of dive into reporting delivery, visibility. These are security things like that, and also again like I said, some better tips and tricks that I'm going to reveal at the end here. Finally, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. Again, this is me. Like I said, I've been in IT for a long time. Right out of college, started with IT, mostly Microsoft stacks. I've been working with SQL Server and things like that for quite a while. Most recent expertise is focused around the Microsoft stack, particularly in the PPM space, with Microsoft Project Online, Project Server. And then the Power BI reporting, also, the newer Power Apps offerings, but always SQL. Again, I am in Houston. Got my wife, my son here. Pack of small dogs, 3 of them. They are little, but they have big personalities. All right, well, let's dive in. All right, so what are some of the challenges that new companies or new adoptees of a solution might face with regards to reporting? In the old days, we used to have our data consumers go into the tool to do the reporting, but it's the landscape has evolved, and so now more and more we're actually relying on a reporting tool to reach into our solutions, aggregate data, present the data, massage it, build upon that data, and make a little bit more meaningful reporting and data consumption for our VIPs. But with that, so if we're going to do that, what tool are we going to use to do that? And once we have selected that tool, how are we going to get at that data? What data do we even have available? What's it look like? How's it structured? And then how are we going to support continued development, that continuous improvement that some of our other guests have talked about? And what's involved in creating a successful strategy? Who are the players? What, and if after we've chosen our reporting tool, what are our access and security controls that are available for us? Do we have sensitive data that needs to be managed, and segregated from specific eyeballs? And finally, hey, this is a lot of data sometimes. What can we do when our data starts to overwhelm our current refresh and solution? So while we know that there's a handful of options when it comes to data visibility within your PPM solution, some much more attractive than others. Today, obviously, we're going to be focusing on Microsoft's current premier data presentation offering of Power BI. So Power BI is easily the reporting tool of choice to create rich, interactive, and always on, always available data visualizations from your Microsoft PPM tool. While there's definitely a learning curve, for folks that might be inexperienced with this tool, it's not necessarily an insurmountable climb. Be aware that there are, tutorials available from Microsoft, and there's also a wealth of how-to videos for free on YouTube. I always say if you can't find a how-to video on YouTube, then it probably can't be done. But this tool will allow your organization to kind of move away from that, 2000s era activity of using a combination of Excel and PowerPoint and email and multiple hours of manpower just to distribute weekly or bi-weekly or monthly vision supporting data to your organization's VIPs and we'll do it in near real time at that with this tool, which is nice. All right, so how do we access Microsoft Projects Online cloud data? It's in the cloud. How do we get there? It lives in the Azure cloud, and it's not on a local SQL server, so we need to use an access point, and that access point is called OData. OData is essentially an XML package that is provided to us by Microsoft that contains all the PPM tables and the data that's stored in Microsoft Project Online's reporting database. This allows us to craft reports that hit the data source at scheduled refresh times, keeping our user-facing reports up to date and, like I said, in near real time. It's important to note that OData connections themselves are not real-time live connections, but rather there is a refresh frequency that we get to schedule. All right, let's talk a little bit about the string. For those of you who already have Project Online, we know that it's accessed through the browser. And once you create that tenant, you're provided with a URL string, and it looks something like this. HTTPS. It's got your company name, .sharepoint, com sites. But then you've given it a unique name. It could be PWA production. It could be something else. Something that you describe it as that your organization sees fit. But we're going to use that original URL, but we're going to append an API or an underscore API / capital P project, capital D data. And that's the OData string rather, that the tool uses to access the cloud-based data. All right, so once we get there, we do have access to, over 40 different PPM tables. And it does look daunting at first glance, but we can start to categorize or mentally categorize these tables into a handful of focus areas to bring a better sense of order to this data. There's project-related data. There's data that's specific to risks and issues. There's task-related data. This is the data that comes out of the schedules themselves. There's assignment data. Assignments are created when you put a resource on a task, one or more resources. There's baseline data that's separate from these other tables. And then we've got our resource-specific data as well. There's timesheet data. And then there's time phase data. So we can think in terms of these kind of groups, and it makes a little bit more sense to us. All right. So the Project Online reporting database that we're going to access using this connection, it's a well rationalized database. I won't call it simple, but it is static. So it's not a moving target, like I'll talk about at some point. And so once you do gain some familiarity with it, you're pretty good, like moving between the different tables and whatnot and pulling out data. But the relationships between these tables are pretty easily identifiable using unique identifiers. What a lot of us in the field call UID fields, unique identifiers. They're aptly named, and they directly reference other associated tables. So you can think of these UID fields as key fields if you're database minded. And these key fields, like I said, are going to link one table to the other. So if you're trying to tie some tasks to a specific project located in the project table, you're going to tie those together with the project UID and on down the line. This is key to your report developers. This understanding of this data is fundamental. All right, so with our understanding of the database's rationalization, we can now start to construct a data model to support typical PPM reporting areas. And such as, portfolio level reporting. This is top-down reporting, from an organizational perspective. It's going to bring multiple projects data together and aggregate, this information for viewing at a high level. We've got project focused reporting. This is, for a focus on individual projects. You can think like a project status report. We've got resource reports. These can be, either top down, looking at our resource, teams as a whole, or our enterprise resource pool as a whole. But we can also do things like dive into individual resource to see, or answer questions like, who's doing what and where and when, and who seems to be a little overloaded or who's underutilized. And then we've got our time phase data, and this is going to allow us to craft reports that use this data that are going to, kind of provide that picture of, items like what are we spending over time, or, which months have higher cost or higher workloads, higher collective workloads. Also, hey, what's Bob working on next month? Simple things like that as well. These are only examples. The main takeaway here is that if you're collecting this PPM data in your solution by way of routine usage, then you can craft reports that present data to your VIPs or other data consumers using a combination of well-crafted data modeling and business supporting reports. All right, so I'm kind of jumping into Power BI here. And so when you bring your tables into Power BI, I'm talking about the Power BI desktop tool. I know that you can do some development from the web. I do not encourage that. There are some gotchas if you're editing in your browser, and which makes it really difficult to share that report or download that report and duplicate it so that you have a starting point. And so I would really strongly encourage anyone in your organization who's doing report work to stay inside the desktop tool. It's free. Right. But when you first bring your tables into Power BI report, the desktop application tool or the development tool, this tool, it's going to automatically link tables together based on the presence of those UID fields that I mentioned earlier. And often the tool, gets the relationships correct. Excuse me. But sometimes it doesn't, or it creates unnecessary linkages. So I think it's a worthy development practice for the developer to create and manage these table relationships themselves, rather than rely on that auto-generated, set of relationships. All right. The key takeaway here again is that it's important that the report / data model developer really understands the data, and experience here is key. There's really no shortcuts to this, unfortunately. Again, the data doesn't change. Just dive in and really start to gain a better understanding with it, and that'll just come over time. It's the good news is that PPM data is generally the same across a lot of platforms. From a concept, and the project online table schema is follows suit. Like I said earlier, it's static. It hasn't really fundamentally changed for about a decade. So once you figure it out, you really own it moving forward. All right, so the data model that you see here in this screenshot, it's simplified. It's only got a handful of tables. But this one is going to allow the data to correctly and logically, flow from 3 different filtering starting points. You can filter this particular data model from a project's perspective. So if you have a report and you want to look at individual projects, you can filter on that project. You can also start with resources. Maybe you want to see things at a team level, or if you want to see things for an individual resource. And then finally, there's also a time set that's going to allow you to craft reports and say, show me everything that's being worked on during this particular date range. And that will show you all the projects that have tasks and assignments with resources attached to them during that particular time frame. So again, understanding the data model is paramount. All right, moving on. Okay, so the data model last screenshot again represented a single data model that was created for a single report. It could be and often is a significant development lift to get right. So, I mean, you could conceivably develop a data model for each report that you have to deliver, but with all those tables and all the relationship links between them, and not to mention any custom measures or calculated fields that went into the development of that model. Do you really want to reinvent that data model wheel each time you create a new report? Probably not. So, what if there's a strategy to streamline rolling out new reports? When new data visualization requirements come into play. What if there was a strategy to minimize the development cycles for multiple reports? When you have minor data model updates. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So a solid strategy that we employ, and you heard some folks mention our Hammerhead tool. One of the ways that our Hammerhead tool drives efficiency is it uses a single report, or excuse me, rather a single data model that is then accessed by multiple reports. So this report, this allows you to, just like I said, create one model and then attach multiple different reports to it. For instance, on that last data slide, that data model could be created and published once, and then we could start to then use that as a data source and hit it with individual other reports. You can create different reports from the same data model. Again, things like portfolio managers looking to view the big picture, project managers just interested in their own current project statuses and the metrics for just their individual projects. Your resource or your timesheet managers, checking in on the timesheet, compliance or resource workloads. And then you could also have reports hitting this data model that are geared towards CFOs dialing into cost metrics. So just think about this for a second. If your developer spent 40 hours or so on that data model, and you've got 10 other reports to create to satisfy stakeholder request, not having to recreate that data model for every report could result in significant time savings at development time. But that's not all. There's also a time and an effort expense for maintaining 10 different data models if a new field or some new data requirements come into play. Your developers would have to go into each report and update each individual data model instead of just doing it once. So good strategy. All right, so a little bit some technical here. How do we do that? So like I said, once that report is created, you created a report that's got a data model in it. You published it up to a Power BI workspace, and more on the Power BI workspace later. We can then access that report as a data model for a new Power BI report. So here in this image, I've got Power BI desktop open. It's a brand new report. I've gone to get data, and I have chosen to use as the data source an existing Power BI data set. And so once I click that, it's going to show me, well, which data set are you looking for? And once I find the data model that I am hoping to use over and over again, I can select it and click connect. Once you connect to that data model, all of those tables that are in that data model are now going to be available for use inside your report. Right? And it's like this for all reports. So all reports are going to have have an exact replica of the data over there within those orange brackets. And again, if you have limited, developer time or limited developer know-how, that's a good launching off point for them. Okay, reporting delivery. Who do we need in our organization? Who are the players to help drive a successful report delivery cycle? So your developers, your Power BI developers, they're going to, develop and maintain the data that's, connected to the models. They're going to do the report development, and all the, they're going to maintain all the associated report files. But they're also going to be the ones who are going to do the publishing of the reports. That's going to, push that up into the cloud-based Power BI service. Your stakeholders and business analysts, you should really get folks like this involved early on. These guys are going to be instrumental in the visualization development process so that you can really provide, accurate, solid report requirements. They can provide design feedback and then, sign off on any final products. keep in mind that reports that are developed in a vacuum will often, stay in one. Right, so involve your stakeholders and your analysts early on. Your workspace owner or admin, this is someone who they actually may be one of the report developers, but this person or persons will control and maintain the Power BI workspace or workspaces, and as such, they're going to also be able to administer the security around user access to your reporting environment. So administration for the workspace is controlled inside the Power BI admin portal. Your Power BI admins are going to decide who in the organization can create workspaces and such, distribute the apps that we'll talk about in a little while. If you're unsure of who that may be, you should reach out to your Office 365 admin. They're the ones who can provide insight into providing Power BI administration rights. All right, let's talk about security. Speaking of controlling who has access to reporting, let's talk about who can do that. We talked about publishing, but where does it go when we publish? Right. Also, you've heard me mention workspaces. So when you publish Power BI report, it's going to go to a publisher selected Power BI workspace. So if the person publishing the report has access to multiple workspaces, when they publish that report, they will then select where that report is going to go. So a workspace is simply an area in the Power BI cloud service that's used to store consumable reports. It can be created by any Power BI user who has the permission to do so, such as your Power BI admin or developer with that right. The workspace creator will give it a solid, recognizable, and easily digestible name, as it will be visible to your report consumers. So I would suggest that it would be wise to decide upon and follow a workspace naming convention so it doesn't end up looking like the Wild West. The workspace is accessible from any browser by any user in your organization with a Power BI Pro license and who has also been granted access to that workspace by the workspace admin. There are premium workspaces out there. Premium workspaces you'll see are distinguished rather by a diamond icon just to the right of their name. And there is a cost associated with premium workspaces. But it's up to your organization to determine whether or not it's more economically feasible to provide individual users with Power BI Pro licenses, or to go with the workspace, the premium workspace option, which does not require folks to have Power BI Pro licenses. All right, a little bit about Power BI workspaces. In the simplest form, workspaces offer locations to store and even directly access published reports. You can think of this as, the repository for published reports. So workspaces allow the admin to set refresh schedules for the report data sets. It allows them to maintain the data connection credentials that are used by the data sets. They can specify folks to get notified other than the data set owners if it fails for some reason. And they also can control, like I said, who has direct access at what level to the workspace, as we'll see in the next slide here. All right, so I'm gonna refer to using a workspace for report access control as a remedial method. It can be done, and I have seen organizations that just allow their users to come right here to the workspace and click on the report, and it opens up in their browser and view the reports that way. Some of the drawbacks to doing it that way is, your users are going to be able to see both reports and the data sets, and it can often become confusing. Once you publish a report to the cloud, if there's a data set associated with that report, you're going to have, basically two items listed. You'll see in this image where I've got basic POL data model. There's a type for report and there's a type for data set. only one of them is the visual that your users want to look at. So that could be kind of confusing at first. Also, the reports are listed in alphabetical order. There's no way to provide sectioning or grouping mechanisms so that you can kind of package these reports in a meaningful manner here in the workspace. Now each report does have an individual URL. So I mean, you could always provide your users with direct access to each report by supplying the URL. But if you've got 10 or 20 different reports, then that's a lot of URLs to distribute. So, but luckily, there is a much more polished alternative, which if you follow my advice, you will use this. And this is where you would only grant workspace access to a limited number of administrative users, but you're going to provide your data consumers, your report consumers, with a nice container of reports, and it's called an app. I know everything is called an app these days. I can't change that. This is no different, but Microsoft calls it a reporting app, and so we're going to call it a reporting app as well. So let's take a look at the Power BI Workspace reporting app. They're created with just a few clicks. Once you're inside the workspace, if it doesn't already have an app associated with it, you will see the Create App button. And so like during the app creation process, when you click that Create App, you can do things like dictate an alternative order to the alphabetical order that appears in the workspace. You can even rename reports. If you don't like the way it's named, maybe your report has a version 1 or a version 2 on it. You can remove that from the viewer. Remove that detail for the viewer. And then you can also, like I said, create sections and groups so that you can put like reports together, and that's a really nice feature. Another thing to understand about creating an app is that you can make use of a feature called audiences. Audiences is a security mechanism that's going to allow you to control which members of which audience can see which reports. Users can be placed in multiple audiences, so that you can, further fine tune your user experience in the app. But this allows you to maintain one workspace that might have all of your reports in it, but it will allow you to tailor that security so that when users access that app through the browser, they're only going to see the reports that they need to see. And so after you have, created that, in my visual here, I've got, an overall PPM reporting, but I've created an audience called timesheet managers. And so maybe that timesheet compliance report that shows, kind of the policing of our user base using our timesheets, maybe we don't want everybody to see that. And so if we just wanted to limit its exposure, we could create a timesheet managers audience, add a handful of people to that audience. And then when we publish our app, those users who are not members of that timesheet managers audience will not see that timesheet compliance report. The members who will, conversely, will see it when they access the app. And the finished app is a much more finely polished experience. So it's going to list all of your reports and reporting sections and report pages over there on the right. And so you've got an easily navigatable menu over there on the right for all of your reporting. You've got a collapsible pane for filtering over there. Oh, did I say right? You've got your menu on the left. My apologies. Your other right. Over there on your real right, you've got a collapsible filter pane for any reports that use filtering. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about big data. We've got our report development and maintenance strategy. We've got our report security strategy. We've created a tailored user experience using the app method. So let's start to slide into home here with some advanced options for managing a large data set and the problems that arise during refreshing. If any of you are familiar, you may have seen this before. You've got a data set and something's gone wrong with it, and it's simply that as your data grows in scale, it might just seem to overwhelm the process that occurs inside a single Power BI report or inside a single Power BI data model. And you may find it necessary to redesign your data model to accommodate these refreshes that are going to time out or don't complete because they're starting to overlap each other, right? And so inside Power BI, or inside Project Online, rather, there's a handful of tables that I'm going to call the heavy hitters. You know, these are tables that, you know, like with any solution, as it continues to scale with usage, they just simply grow large over time. And because of this increase in size, these tables are going to start to take longer and longer to refresh. And so inside a standard Power BI report model, it's going to launch all of those table refreshes simultaneously, which is a great time saver for small data sets. But when this parallel table refreshing is going to get troublesome and very laborious for the report for these tables that have a real deep record count. And so to realize a gain in processing speed and efficiency, this physical refresh activity for this data, it just may simply need to be handled outside of your Power BI report as we've currently designed it. Okay. And we're going to do that, and we're going to do that with data flows. So luckily, Microsoft has provided us with this super easy to use and efficient tool that really handles large data sets really well. It's just simply significantly more powerful and much more efficient. These data flows are going to, like I said, refresh the data outside of the report, but your report is going to reference them inside the report, just like it was a regular table. So your report doesn't know that it's a data flow rather than a table. And so just like a report, you know, each one of these data flows can be scheduled to refresh directly from the workspace if you like. But better still, we could even make use of another Microsoft technology called Power Automate. And that's going to give the developer even more complete control over refreshing the order of execution for these table refreshes. And it's even going to allow us to schedule additional data refreshes, you know, more frequently than what Power BI service allows. And so I'm going to cover both of these. So let's just jump in. All right, so to create a data flow, you know, data flows are created directly from the workspace by clicking on the new button and selecting data flow. Now, once you click data flow, it's going to ask you, well, what we're going to do here is we're going to define new tables. And so that's the one that you're going to click. So you're going to use an OData connection with this data flow, just like we did earlier in the report. Right. And so my pro tip here is to create a single data flow per heavy hitter table. All right. And like I've done here. And so I've gone through this process and I've created a data flow where I have provided the OData URL, but for each one of these, I've only selected a single table. All right. And I've given each one of these data flows a name that corresponds to the table that I created. I'm just thinking ahead here, making it easy for me. And because I'm going to put these in a chronological refresh order, because I can now, I'm going to number them. Again, just making it easier for me, you know, a little bit further down the line. So just to recap, what we're looking at here is we are looking at 6 different data flows, 1 per heavy hitter table. You know, the time phase, the assignments, you know, the baselines, our tasks. You know, obviously the more projects that we have in our solution, the more tasks are created. So it just grows exponentially over time. All right. And so now that we have our data flows, how do we use them? Well, like I said, inside our project, our Power BI rather, you know, when we're choosing to get data instead of putting in an OData connection like we did earlier, we're going to hit, you know, get data. And we're going to choose a data flow, not the Power BI data set, but we're going to choose a data flow. And it's going to pop up a screen for us that's going to say, well, which data flows do you want to use? And so you will walk down to your workspace. You will open up your workspace. It will show you all of the data flows that you have in there. You'll open up each individual data flow and you will select each individual table that is in those data flows. And then you're just going to simply click load. And as soon as you load it, all of those tables are now available inside your report, or if this is your data model. So keep in mind that if you had already created, the data model, like I did earlier on in the presentation, but it's 100% O database going directly to the cloud, you're going to want to update your current model to use these new data flow based heavy hitter tables. Right. So keep in mind, one of the other beauties about Power BI, as was mentioned in an earlier presentation, is you can have multiple data sources in a single report. So you can have direct OData connections for less transactional tables. You can have data flows as data sources for these heavy hitter tables. You can have external sources. You can even have SharePoint lists. And if you're doing any Power Apps development and you're collecting data in the Dataverse, you can even use that information as well, all in one single report data model. All right, good stuff. All right, so we've got our data flows created. We've got our data model updated to use the data flows. The next thing we want to do is our Power Automate. All right. So in developing the Power Automate routine, we're going to use some built-in triggers, that's just provided for us. This is easy, no code development here. This is when, one or more table finishes refreshing, we're just going to execute the next table refresh, automatically. We could even build in some failure emails, in our Power Automate. I'm not going to, in my example here, I don't do that, but you can easily put in a pass or fail option, so that if you do fail, then you get an email notification. Okay, and so then like I said earlier, we can schedule this routine to run whenever and how often that we would like or need to do it. All right, so how do we do this? So if you're inside your Office 365 and you have access to Power Automate, you can click the Rubik's Cube or the waffle icon up there in the upper left and choose Power Automate. Once you get to the Power Automate screen, it's going to ask you, what do you want to create? And we're going to create a scheduled cloud flow. That is what we're going to do, because we're going to schedule it. So this is something that's done on a timer. All right, so we're going to build the scheduled cloud flow. We're going to give it a flow name. We're going to give it a starting date, starting time. We're going to tell it how often we want it to repeat. Then we click create. Now we're off to the races. We've got the shell built. Next thing we've got the recurrence. So it knows when and what is going to run. Now we need to choose some operations. And so we are looking specifically for data flows. And so we're going to type in data flow into that search bar. And look, there's only one option for us. And so we're going to choose that refresh a data flow. Once we choose that refresh a data flow option, it's going to ask us, well, where do I get this? We get it from the workspace. Which workspace? We're going to get it from our PPM reporting workspace, or whatever workspace you have your data flows stored. And then it's going to ask you, well, hey, select your data flow. And see how I numbered these? Now I get to walk right through these one at a time in the order that I had already dictated, through my naming convention. And so after I click on assignment, it's going to create that one data flow refresh. I'm not done there, because like I said, I've got 6 of these I need to enter. And so I'm going to repeat this process for all 6 of them. And so again, just to recap, we've got, this is going to kick off at a certain time of day. It's going to go one after another, so they're not stepping on each other's toes. It's going to devote its full processing power to the first one. When that one finishes, it's going to go on to the next one. When that one finishes, it's going to go on to the next one, so on and so forth. All right. And so after we've done all of our data flows, again, we may have other data sources in our Power BI data model. Right. And so my last step then is going to be what? It's going to be to refresh my Power BI data set. Okay. So I'm going to click another step. And this time I'm going to type in Power BI into the search bar. And I'm going to scroll down until I see the one that's called refresh a data set. And so I'm going to click on that refresh a Power BI data set. It's going to ask me, well, what workspace do I get this data set from? You provide that. And which data set do you want to refresh? And you provide that as well. Okay. And so here you are, here you have it. You've got something that is scheduled. It's going to, on a routine basis, it's going to kick off your Power Automate, which is going to kick off each one of your heavy hitter data flow tables one by one. And then finally, after that, it's going to refresh your Power BI data set. And after that Power BI data set is refreshed, every single report that is connected to them is going to be automatically refreshed also, so that when your users access their reporting, they can be as comfortable that that data is as fresh as the top of the last hour. All right. Okay, so final takeaways. You know, we've got a well-defined report delivery team. We know who's doing what. We've got a well-designed, efficiently refreshed report data model. You know, we have multiple reports that are presenting fresh PPM data to our user base. And we've got the right users based on our security model that are accessing the right reports. And they can do that at any time of the day. And finally, we've even set ourselves up so that we can continuously develop rapid reports, because now we're just, you know, mainly concerned at the visualizations, which is the fun part of development, rather than the data model, which is the more tedious part of the development process. All right, well, that wraps it up for me, guys and gals. We'll go to Q&A.
Thanks, Todd. Super presentation and content. Let's see if there's any questions in the queue for Todd. Well, if there's no questions, I guess we can continue. Now onto the fun. Before we wrap up, we are raffling off a few project-specific items. In order to enter, to be eligible to win, you must complete a short survey, which will be sent in a link in our follow-up event email. Enter for a chance to win a Hammerhead Shark water bottle, a copy of our latest book release, Ultimate Study Guide for your Microsoft Project 2019, and a crowd favorite, the Hammerhead Wine Key. We'll be sending all attendees a link to our survey. By filling it out, you'll be registering for the drawing. Winners will be chosen at random tomorrow, so please submit your surveys in the next 24 hours. If you or anyone in your organization is looking for help or guidance with project or the PPM platform, do reach out. PROJILITY provides planning, deployment, and support services around Microsoft PPM platform designed to help you drive improved use and adoption. Additionally, you can visit our website, which has a series of blogs, as well as our YouTube channel that includes tons of great videos on topics related to project and PPM. Reach out via email, info@progility.com, if you'd like to talk about your specific needs. I'll leave this slide up for a few moments. Thank you again for joining our conference today. We appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you online for our next session. Have a great day.